Not only are you here, but you're friendly too. Oh, that's so great. No one brought tomatoes with them, like yeah. You guys are either super committed or y'all own 4x4s. Am I right? No? No? Yeah. Some of you just are fearless. That's what it is. That's what it is. I'm sorry, I got to clear my throat. We are in our tribe series. And I want to begin today by acknowledging something. Like the greatest gift that the Lord has given us, other than Himself and life in Him, is one another, right? And amen on that one? One another? Yeah? It is. It's the greatest gift, other than Himself and the people around us. And therefore, I want to do this. Just turn to your neighbor and say, thank you. Thank you. Do that. Yeah, yeah. If you're far away from your neighbor, there's some of us out there that, just yell across the room, thank you. And then the people, there you go. That's right, Steve. Thank you. There you go. And then the people who just receive that say, why? And then you say, for that, right? Right there. That's right. It's good gifts. God's good gifts to us. I mean, we thrive with one another. We need one another. We find ourselves in a relationship to one another. We learn who we are in relationship to one another. One of the things we've been looking at is one way to live together, and one way in which we really thrive is by living in tribes. And what we've tried to say about a tribe is a group of people that they are not just anonymous strangers, but they're our people. There's a group of people out there that's your people. You belong to them, but they belong to you. If you don't have that, let's help you find some, because we will thrive better. Your life will be more fulfilled. You will understand who you are and God's calling for you much more clearly when you're a part of a tribe, a people that you belong to, and a purpose, because we find our purpose with our people, right? We discover who we are. We discover what our life is for. We discover the ways in which we're called to bless one another as we live lives together. So a tribe is a group of people that we belong to, that belong to us, in which we pursue our purpose together. Right? These are wonderful things. As I said, this way of living just causes us to flourish. My son right now, he is 16 years old, and for the last year and a half, he's joined the young weightlifters tribe. And so what this means is he's become this muscle man over the last year and a half. And in fact, we were just talking about it because another family member of ours is kind of going through a rough time. And I said, Patrick, maybe you have some encouraging words. We were around the table, and he said, I do. He said, after COVID, I was a freshman. I was overweight, and I was a nameless loser. And then I started lifting weights. And once I started lifting weights, I became a baller. I had direction. I had discipline. I know where my life is going. And I was like, are you going to sell me supplements now? Or like, what is this? Come on, But there is some truth to it. I mean, he has found himself, and he's found his tribe, and he's found some direction. And for right now, at least, he seems to be flourishing in that. It's a good example of all of us being able to find ourselves, discover ourselves as part of our tribe. But sometimes our tribes go toxic, Sometimes the people that we're a part of, the tribe that we're a part of, can grow toxic. Every one of us, I think, has experienced this in one form or another. Long group of friends. All of a sudden we find that something gets in there, and some of our great relationships, our deepest, longest relationships, and begins to poison those relationships. Sometimes we're part of a ministry team, and things just start to sour between us. Sometimes it's business partnerships. Things start exciting, and then it just starts going south. Also happens in churches, right? Some of us here know experience some of the pain of being a part of church, and things grow toxic. Right? It can happen to the best of us. It can happen in the best tribes. And that's what I want to talk about today. Is I want to talk about when our tribes go toxic, what that looks like, and what we can do about it. Because if you haven't experienced it, chances are that you will. And it's important for us to learn how to identify it and to navigate those waters. We're going to be looking at Numbers 32 today. Numbers 32. We don't often preach from Numbers. There's a good reason for that. It's filled with a bunch of numbers, right? But there's a good story in here, an important story about what happens when tribes go toxic and how we can identify that. So, where are we in the story of God with his people? Well, we know that the Lord had called a people together, the people of Israel, to be a presence of healing and reconciliation in a broken world. God says to Abraham, it's from your children, your seed, all nations will be blessed. He calls forth a nation, a group of people. But it's not just a mass. It's not just this group of anonymous crowd of people. When he calls this people together to be the presence, a healing presence in the world, he calls them together. It's tribes within a nation, 12 tribes within the people of Israel. Of course, we know what happens. Israel is in bondage. They're slaves in Egypt. God hears their cries and sends Moses down to liberate them. He liberates them from their captors. He liberates them from Egypt. And he says, I've called my people out of slavery and into a land flowing with milk and honey, a promised land. But between slavery and the promised land, they're going to have to learn a lot of lessons. They have to learn to live with God and with one another. And they do that as tribes, wandering the wilderness for 40 years together. All kinds of struggles, all kinds of things that they have to work through together. The Lord's leading them, trying to strengthen them to the point to where when they enter the promised land, they are united people. And they can go in, once they cross the Jordan into the promised land, they're going to face some of the strongest and hardest battles that they have ever faced. The Lord had been preparing them for that. To cross the Jordan as a single people, comprised of 12 tribes with one spirit, one purpose, one promise. To be a people who will come home to the promised land. But on the eve of crossing that river and entering into the promised land, we find something's happened. Somewhere along the way, 2 of the tribes had gone toxic. We don't know it until a meeting is called. This is so often how things happen. You don't know as a leader of a people that the tribes that you have been leading have gone toxic until they say, we have some concerns. We have some ideas. And that's what they do. Let's go ahead and look at that. This is Numbers 32. 2 of the tribes, Gad and Reuben, called together Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the other leaders of Israel. Let's go ahead and go there. 32, verse 1 and following. The tribes of Reuben and Gad owned vast numbers of livestock. So remember how I said each of the tribes, each of the tribes each had their own spirit, had their own gifts, had their own purpose. Reuben and Gad's purpose was livestock. They were sheep herding tribes. That's what they did. They did it really well. And we find that they're thriving with vast numbers here. When they saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were ideally suited for their flocks and herds, they came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the other leaders of the community, and they said, notice the towns of Adaroth and Dibon and Jazer and Nimrah and Heshbon and Eleleh and Sibmah and Nebo and Beon. These are some great names, right? Some great towns. The Lord has conquered this whole area for the community of Israel, and it's ideally suited for all our livestock. If we have found favor with you, please let us have this land as our property instead, that's an important word, instead of giving us the land across the Jordan River. Now, I've been a pastor long enough to experience something like this. A meeting is called. They want to talk to the leaders of the community. And they begin, the appeal is very respectful. It doesn't seem toxic on the surface. We would like this land right here. It's good. It's well-fitting for us. What do you think? But if we understand what God had promised and called the people of Israel to be, you can understand that this is not nearly as innocent of a claim as it seems on the surface. Reuben and Gad are two tribes. They were actually, of the 12 tribes of Israel, they were on the south portion. They were the rear end of the people. And these two tribes had been obviously talking with one another, conceiving plans. Now, usually, again, if you want to change course, it's because you're discontent. You're unhappy with something that's going on. Probably disappointed with Moses' leadership, the direction of the nation as a whole. Maybe they just feel like the rear end of the people of Israel, because that's where they were. They were at the rear. When they come to Moses, you can see that they've already formulated a plan, and they've already begun to conspire together to execute that plan. What they want Moses to do is give them all of these particular towns. You understand, they've planned this out. They've already made their decision. We want your blessing on this. We're going to separate. We're going to go our own way. The grass is greener right here, and this is what we want. You see? I want you to see that there have been secret meetings. There have been closet conversations. And to such a degree that they've decided to formulate a plan, even though the Lord had promised and called the people of Israel across the Jordan to the promised land. They say, we're not going to go that direction. We want to go this direction. What's Moses' response? I want you to see, this is telling. Look at Moses. Do you intend to stay here while your brothers go across and do all the fighting? Moses asked the men of Gad and Reuben. Why do you want to discourage the rest of the people of Israel from going across to the land that the Lord has given them? This is really important. This is really telling, because what Moses identifies here is that Reuben and Gad's proposal is not as innocent as it seems. In fact, it's devastating for the people of God, because Reuben and Gad are about to leave the people of Israel right on the eve of one of their greatest battles as they're entering the promised land. See, Moses has the larger vision of God's promise for God's people. And he recognizes Gad and Reuben's request for what it is. We don't want to be a part of God's promise. We don't want to be a part of where the Lord is leading us. What we like is what we see right here. And we know that this is good for us and for our group and for our tribes. Therefore, we're going to go our own way. That's what we want, and we want you to bless us. Moses' response, again, shows where Moses' heart is. Are you planning to stay here while your brothers go across the river and fight? Do you see that word, brothers? Who do you belong to? What people do you belong to? One thing about tribes is so wonderful is when you have a group of people that share a common purpose and a bond together. There's amazing things that can happen in that group. But one of the things that can happen that's a very dangerous thing that makes it grow toxic is that tribe begins to grow inward. They begin to conceive their own plans and their own ideas. They decide what's right and what's wrong. And they decide what's best for them. And they become blind to everybody on the outside. This is when tribes become tribalistic, divisive, and destructive. Their only concern is their own, you see. Moses says, look, your plan, which sounds so innocent on the surface, it's going to discourage all of the people of Israel. It's going to weaken God's people right when they need to be united and strong. So he's really telling them, look up. See the bigger picture. Remember who you are. Remember who you are called to. Remember your purpose. Remember God's promise for us. God said, I have called you out of slavery and into a land flowing with milk and honey, the land of promise. You're going to abandon the promise of God for your own plan, for your own people, for your own group. You know, this isn't just something that Israel faced. This is something that all of our tribes face. This is a common threat. The best things about tribes is that we have a purpose and we have a close group of people that we belong to. But one of the most dangerous things about that is we turn inward and we forget everybody else. We become blind to everybody outside of our tribe. I was talking to you about my son, Patrick. My son is also part of the Tippy Canoe football team, Tip City football. They did really well this year. They made it to the Final Four, state Final Four, Division III. Never got that far. It was exciting to be a part of it. As you guys know, I'm a huge football guy. No, but it was exciting to be a parent and be a part of that whole thing. But it was also really enlightening because as I went around and started talking to people, you know, the conversation would come up. I would get a lot of cold responses about this. And I even had a couple of people while we're talking, as this conversation comes up, they mumble under their breath, "I hate Tip City." Right? And you know what? I think for good reason. You know, Tip City had developed a reputation of being a people that they're so into their tribe that they become rude and condescending and arrogant towards other schools and other students. Having kids growing up in that school, I've seen parents act in that way towards the other students. It's kind of embarrassing. What is a strength has become a weakness, you see. The desire to do well as a tribe, to be committed to something together, right? Led them to be poison to everybody on the outside. Now, I do have to say, they're getting better at that. Those of you who have already passed judgment on Tip City schools, they are improving in my experience. And the coach is doing a really good job of trying to turn that whole thing around. But the same thing that happens with, small community sports happens on a larger scale too, right? I mean, we know this, right? You turn on the TV and you have politicians more concerned about the good of their party than for the nation as a whole. In fact, what they're concerned about seems more than anything is beating the enemy, right? The other party, destroying them, making them look stupid and foolish, right? The mindset begins to set in of it's us and then it's them. It's us on the inside and then there's everybody on the outside. And we're in the know. We know what's right. We know what's good. We have the truth. Everybody else is in the dark. And we turn against everybody on the outside. You see? And this is when tribes become tribalistic and it becomes toxic. You could see this in our world today, right? It's like everywhere. I mean, I think we're probably more tribalistic now than we ever have been. You know what's fascinating about this, though, is, when the Lord came to save us from this division, this divisiveness, this brokenness. When he came to save us from this, to begin a ministry of reconciliation, a life of reconciliation, where we not only be reconciled to God, but be reconciled to one another, that we would recognize that we belong to something bigger, that our brothers and sisters are actually going beyond our tribe. It includes everybody. As Paul says in the book of Acts, chapter 17, every family and nation is a child of the Father, that we belong to one another. What he does, what the Lord does, is he gives rise, he calls together a new tribe, a new group of people called the church. And this church is meant to be a reconciling presence in the world. But this new tribe is supposed to function differently than everyone else. This new tribe is to be a tribe of all people, for all people. It's a wonderful thing when you look at what Jesus tries with his 12 disciples and the followers of Jesus. What he tries to begin to build is a group of people that the closer you get to the center of that group, the closer you get to everybody on the outside. It's a wonderful thing. That the closer you get to Jesus Christ, who's the very center of his people, the closer you are to everyone else on the outside. This is what Jesus said. I mean, this is really central to his message. Matthew 25 is one of the most famous teachings of Jesus, the last judgment. He says, you will be judged based on how you treat those outside your tribe. He says, in the last days, the king will stand forth, and all nations will be gathered unto him. And he will separate them between sheep and goats. And the sheep will come with him into his kingdom, and the goats will be excluded to the outside. That's right. And you know what determines the sheep from the goats? How you treat those on the outside. Jesus said to the sheep, come with me, you are blessed, enter my kingdom. For when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was sick, you comforted me. And the sheep said, when did we do this to you? And he said, whenever you did this to the what? The least, you did it to me. Do you know that you have a group of people in your life that are the least? We all have them. We all have the people that we think merit our love and affection and attention the most, the greatest. We all have those, right? The people that we think are most worthy of our time and attention and love, those are the greatest in our life. And because we have that group, that greatest group, do you know what we also have? Those people that are least worthy of our time and our attention. We call those the least. Now, this is the hard challenge. Jesus is not pulling punches here. He's saying, you can measure how much your love for me by what you do with your least. Who's your least? Who is it? Who's the enemy? Who's the one that you're confident is the problem in our world? Jesus says, you can know how much you love me by what you do with them. You see, this Jesus tribe that we're a part of, it doesn't live by us or them. It lives according to us for them. We are here for them. I am here. You are here for them. Jesus is trying to get in touch with us. You know what I'm saying? He's calling us right now. He's like, hey, it's the least. I want you to take this seriously. I want you to take this personally, okay? Because you can take this story of what Jesus is saying about the least and you can kind of make it abstract. It sounds really like cosmic and all of that. It's not. It's personal. You and I have a least. You and I have those individuals, those groups that we would say, now listen, I have my tribe and we're good, and it does not include them. And that's what makes it so great. And Jesus is saying, your love for me is measured by how you treat them. Gad and Reuben, they struck a compromise. They were successful. Moses compromised with them. And he said, as long as you come with us and you bring us soldiers to fight the battle, you can leave behind all of your treasures and your families here east of the Jordan. You can settle in that land. You can come back. Your soldiers can come back when the job is done. And you can get your way. You can get your land, your people. What's interesting about the story is we don't know what happens with Gad and Reuben. They could have been very successful. That land, they could have prospered. But we do know this, is they disappear from the record. The history of God's people living out his promise. They fade away. They were no longer a part of God's people who lives for the blessing of the world. I pray that doesn't happen with us. I pray that our plans don't get in the way of God's promise. The idea, our enthusiasm for our group and our people doesn't keep us from seeing God's larger purpose. And we realize that each tribe that we're a part of, as affectionate as we can be towards one another, as much as we love and care for one another, we don't exist for ourselves. We exist for everyone on the outside. You see, it's a beautiful thing to be called according to God's purpose and to live into God's promise. And I feel like I've been a part of the church long enough to know that that's hard. It's hard. Because being a part of this people is messy and it's difficult. But we're living into his promise, right? Would you stand with me? I want us to pray for one another. I want to pray for our hearts. I want to pray that we would be open to God's promises and God's purpose for us. And I want to conclude by praying for the least. Lord Jesus, I believe each person here has been called according to your purpose. We thank you so much, Lord, to be part of your people. We thank you so much for the friendships, the relationships that grow in this place, among this specific family that you have here, Lord, at Restoration. I pray, Lord, also that your Spirit would protect it. You would protect us. Lord, that you would, Lord, keep our eyes fixed on the higher purpose. That we wouldn't be turned inward, that we wouldn't become blind to everyone on the outside, that our hearts wouldn't close off to the needs of those around us. Lord, I pray, Lord, that we would be a people that thrive, Lord, seeking to be a part of your larger vision of who we are. Everything that gets in the way, Lord, of that, Lord, I pray that you would help us discern what it is, and you'd give us the strength to remove it. And Lord, I want to close today by praying for everybody that's on the outside of our hearts. Everybody that you call the least. Those that are least on our list. Those that are least desired. The least respected. The least loved. Lord, I pray, Lord, that you would bless them, that you would lead them, Lord, into your goodness and your truth. I pray, Lord, that you would reveal yourself in a deeper way to them. Lord, I pray that we would see them for who they are. Lord, I pray that we'd be a people that could look around and not see outsiders, but see brothers and sisters or potential brothers and sisters. I know, Lord, that for myself that this is Easier said than done. But in your Spirit and in your time, all things are possible. So fulfill your promise with us, Lord, as we make our own journey here as a church toward the land of your promise. I pray, Lord, that we would stay together. We would cross that Jordan. We would find ourselves, Lord, with brothers and sisters, a people that are whole and holy in you.